Speaker will discuss the new 2020 ordinances that affect ADUs and their financing. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type your question in the chat box, and I'll direct your questions appropriately after all members of the panel have spoken. All right, let's get started. First, I'd like to introduce Tai Ung with the County Assessor's Office. Hi, Tai.
Hello, everyone. So today I'll play a video presentation of what I put together for the Arcadia Realtor Association. And then I'll be available after the video and after everybody has presented to answer any further questions. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. All right. Let me know if the audio goes through.
Accessory dwelling units. Legislative changes effective January 1st, 2020. What are accessory dwelling units? ADU. Accessory dwelling units, ADU, are additional housing on the same lot as a primary dwelling unit. ADUs are also known as granny flats, mother-in-law apartments, and so on. They are dwellings either attached or detached from a main house that exists on a lot with another house. Many ADUs are built above garages or are converted garages. ADUs come in many shapes and sizes. They can be attached or detached. Here are some examples of actual ADUs. 2017 ADU legislation. In 2017, California's legislature created favorable accessory dwelling unit ADU legislations. While those laws paved the way for increased ADU development, some cities enacted ordinances that rendered ADU development infeasible or cost prohibitive. 2020 ADU updates. On January 1st, 2020, a series of laws went into effect that revised and relaxed the laws governing ADUs. The new laws were intended to help address the housing shortage in California and make ADU development easier. By further reducing barriers to ADU development, the new legislative changes could bring tens of thousands of new ADUs online over the next few years. Statewide ADU law. These 2020 ADU rule changes apply statewide in California. If a municipality creates their own ADU ordinance, it must comply with these new rules. 2 ADUs per single-family residential lot. Prior to 2020, a single-family zone lot could only have one ADU, either an ADU or JADU, but not both. Now both an ADU and JADU may be built. This means that you can add 2 rental units to your property, an ADU and a JADU. The updated 2020 legislation prohibits a local agency from establishing a minimum square footage requirement for an attached accessory dwelling unit that would prohibit an efficiency unit. If an ADU has 1 bedroom or less, a local agency cannot set a maximum square footage that is less than 850 square feet. If an ADU has 2 or more bedrooms, the local agency cannot set a maximum square footage that is less than 1,000 square feet. A local agency is also prohibited from establishing any other minimum or maximum size for an accessory dwelling unit based upon a percentage of the proposed or existing primary dwelling, limits on lot coverage, floor area ratio, open space for either attached or detached dwelling units that prohibits at least an 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit that is at least 16 feet in height with a 4-foot side and rear yard setback. The maximum size of your ADU depends on whether it is attached to or detached from your existing residence. If an ADU is attached to or a conversion of a portion of existing residence, it can be up to 1,200 square feet or 50% of the size of the existing home, whichever is greater. If the ADU is detached, it can be a maximum of 1,200 square feet. If the detached ADU is a conversion of existing space, there is no maximum floor area restriction. All cities must now allow for the following ADUs. 1. A new 800 square feet, 16 feet max height detached ADU with 4 feet side and rear yard setback. 2. An ADU or JADU created by converting an existing space in the main residence. 3. An ADU or JADU created by converting an existing garage or carport. Updates to JADUs. In 2020, new legislation made the creation of JADUs more lenient. Previously, JADUs could only be created from the conversion of existing bedroom space. That's not the case anymore. A JADU can be created within a proposed or existing single-family dwelling or accessory structure, such as a garage or carport. A JADU may include an expansion of up to 150 square feet beyond the footprint of the existing structure, but the expansion cannot affect ingress or egress. With the expansion, the JADU still must be less than or equal to 500 square feet. No parking is required for a JADU, except for the conversion of an attached garage into a JADU, in which case the parking must be replaced. The exception to the parking rule does not currently apply if a garage is converted into a JADU. The owner occupancy exemption does not apply to a property with the JADU. In 2020, public transit was clarified and referred to any means of transportation that charges set fees, runs on fixed route, and is available to the public, i.e., bus stops, train station, or other location where the public can access buses, trains, subways, and other forms of public transportation. Pre-2020, local agencies could have their own setback rules. This resulted in fewer ADU constructions, as local agencies use larger setback rules to make it more difficult to construct ADUs that can meet the larger setback requirements. Now, the setbacks for new ADUs have been reduced to 4 feet for side and rear yards. Local authorities can no longer enforce larger setbacks on ADUs. If an accessory structure, such as a garage or carport, is removed and replaced with an ADU, the ADU can retain the existing reduced setbacks if it matches the footprint of the removed structure. Here is an example of a garage that was either converted into an ADU or demolished and rebuilt as an ADU. The garage had a setback that was less than 4 feet. With the new rule, the less than 4 feet setback is retained as long as the footprint is still the same as the footprint of the previous structure. ADUs on multifamily zone lots. Pre-2020, ADUs were limited to single-family residential zone lots. The number of ADUs that may be created in a multifamily dwelling is equal to 25% of the number of existing units or one ADU, whichever is greater. Excess building space may be converted into ADUs. If no excess building space is available, a new ADU can be built on excess land. No owner occupancy requirements until 2025. An owner is not required to live in the main residence or ADU. If a JADU is built, an owner is required to live in one of those units. The exemption currently does not apply to a JADU. Impact fees. Cities will no longer be able to charge impact fees for ADUs under 750 square feet, and impact fees for ADUs larger than 750 square feet shall be proportional to the size of the ADU in relation to the primary dwelling. Cities must now provide ministerial approval or denial of ADUs within 60 days of receiving the application, in cases where there is an existing single-family dwelling on the lot. ADUs created by conversions are granted automatic approval. If an ADU is being built at the same time as a main residence, the 60 days rule does not apply. Amnesty Program. If an ADU is out of code, the owner has 5 years to bring their unit up to code. Homeowners Association, HOAs. Now, HOAs, CCNRs, or other neighborhood groups cannot prohibit the development of an ADU or JADU. Separate conveyances. Prior to 2020, separate conveyance of ADU from primary residence was not allowed. Now, local agency may allow ADUs to be sold or conveyed separately from a primary residence under limited circumstances to a qualified buyer if certain conditions are met. This concludes my presentation on ADUs.
Thank you so much, Ty. Very informative. Definitely a lot of changes in 2020. Now to narrow down specifically for the city of Monrovia, we have Craig Jimenez and Sheri Bermejo with the city of Monrovia, and they'll be doing a presentation together.
Well, good afternoon. We're very pleased to be here today to give you an overview of the city of Monrovia's regulations. And some of this is probably going to be very similar to Ty's presentation. As he stated, the state has very little, given very little leeway for cities to adopt separate regulations. But there are some things that are specific to Monrovia. But one of the things that we're really excited to be here today, Sheri and I, are to talk to you, is that we really look at our relationship with realtors and brokers. It's a very important part of what we do, because you are conveying a lot of information to future Monrovians. And so that, again, that we want to make sure that you get the right information, so then that you can then pass that along. So again, we're really, really excited to be here. So real briefly, before I turn it over to Sheri to talk about the nuts and bolts, I just want to kind of run through some of the background and expand a little bit about what Ty talked about. So as Ty said, that last year, the state enacted a number, specifically six bills that amended the state ADU laws. The states had regulations about ADUs going back to the 1980s. They were originally called, granny flats or granny units, and then they were called second dwelling units, and now are collectively called ADUs. So the most recent changes have really limited local jurisdictions' ability to apply their own zoning. So there's a lot more surety from community to community. So there's several types of ADUs, and here's just a couple examples of what an ADU is. But essentially, it is a self-contained, independent residential dwelling unit on the same lot as where there is an existing or proposed housing unit. So it can be a conversion of a basement, it can be a converted garage, you can build a brand new detached ADU, or you can attach an ADU. So again, or convert existing space within the house. A lot of different options, and we'll talk through some of those a little bit more in detail when we talk about our regulations. Then there's the JADU, which is a junior accessory dwelling unit. Now this is also it's a independent living unit, but it's not what I would call a complete living unit, because it doesn't have to have a full kitchen, and it also is part of an existing or a proposed single family dwelling. So they're only allowed on single family lots. They can have their own restroom, but they also can share a restroom. So in a sense, this is sort of like an expanded, or renting a room out with a kitchenette. Basically is what a JADU is. So there is a lot of flexibility in there, but I think the most important thing to think about with an JADU is that typically it's not new construction. This is conversion of a space within a house. The City of Monrovia's regulations, we have expanded the ability to do ADUs throughout the city in all of our residential zones in compliance with state law. Also, we have a number of planned development zones and in our neighborhood commercial zone, which so any zone that allows residential uses has to and does allow either the conversion or construction of new ADUs. In reality, in Monrovia, probably about 90% of the parcels in Monrovia can have an ADU. So I think it's, what we like to say is that basically everybody gets an ADU, and you can get a JADU too. So our review process, there's two types of ADU review processes, but it's important to emphasize that both of them are ministerial, means there's no discretionary review. Doesn't require a public hearing unless you're asking for something outside of what the ordinance allows, like you need a variance. So there's two types of proposals. One is a by right proposal. Bypass planning and go directly to building. You submit your plans into building, and it goes through the plan check process. And then once the plans are approved, then we issue the permit. Then there's other types of ADUs that go to planning first, but their review really is basically just conformance with the ordinance. And there are some additional review that's built within our ordinance to try and maximize compatibility of new ADUs within our existing neighborhoods, which again is very, very important to us. So how do we balance that, allowing new units and then also allowing, making sure that new development is consistent with our neighborhood. So there are a few very specific objective design standards in compliance with state law that we've applied. So again, that's a very brief overview, and I'm going to turn it over to Sheri now and let her talk about some of the specifics.
All right, thank you, Craig. And my name is Sheri Bermejo. I'm the Planning Division Manager for the City of Monrovia. Very happy to participate in this presentation. And I would like to just walk you through the development standards that were recently adopted by our City Council. They'll become effective on November 5th. And as Craig mentioned, our ordinance streamlines the development review and approval process, and it does that by having two pathways to approval. One is a set of different types of proposals. If they meet this criteria, they go straight to building and just get a building permit. And the second one is if they exceed that scope, they just get a little additional review, but against standards that are specified in our ordinance, and then they get a building permit. So I like to walk you through, pictures are worth 1,000 words. And so I'll just give you some examples. So this next series of slides are going to explain types of ADUs that are proposed on single family lots that just need a building permit. So anytime an ADU is proposed within a new single family dwelling, so let's say someone purchases a lot, it's vacant, they can propose a new home with an ADU and a garage. And that is a by right approval, provided that it meets the zoning setbacks for the main house. The zoning also is allowed to be exceeded for the floor area ratio. The amount of living area can be exceeded up to a maximum of 800 square feet. And that's to ensure that the zoning does allow for at least one ADU. The permits for those types of projects are issued concurrently once the single family home is approved. And the only parking that must be provided is for that new dwelling. Now, another type of ADU that just qualifies for a building permit is anytime an ADU is created within an existing single family dwelling or an existing accessory structure. Ty touched on this, is that there's no additional setbacks required. So in an example of an existing garage that doesn't meet the state standard 4-foot side and rear setback, if it's 2 feet away, it can be converted. What's important to note is that if it's an existing accessory structure, it's important to remember that that was likely built under accessory standards. So when you go through the conversion, you do need to bring it up to residential building codes. The minimum size for an ADU in our ordinance is going to be 220 square feet. And there's no size limit on conversion of space. A building by right approval is also issued for an ADU that's created as a new detached structure. And there are, the criteria here is that it has to meet this minimum size range between 220 and 800 square feet. The maximum building height for this type of ADU is 16 feet, and then it has to meet the setbacks of 4 feet side and rear. And then, as Ty mentioned, in addition to that by right 800 square foot ADU, a JADU is also a possibility, and that's created through the conversion of existing living area. And Monrovia's thresholds for size is between 220 and 500. So the maximum size for a JADU in Monrovia is going to be 500 square feet. So single family has a by right ability to do ADUs, and multifamily lots that can accommodate multifamily dwellings are also allowed ADUs. So in the city's former ordinance, ADUs were only allowed on single family lots. Now they are allowed on multifamily properties. So there's two categories that we outline in the ordinance, and that is if someone's wanting to provide or propose an ADU on a multifamily lot that's already developed. The number that they're granted or they're allowed depends on the number of dwellings that are located in the multifamily dwelling building. And the ADUs can be created through the conversion of non-habitable space within each of those residential buildings, which includes garages, closets, or storage rooms. The number they get is it's a minimum of 1 or up to 25% of the existing number of units within that building. If based on that formula, if there's an opportunity to preserve a garage and the homeowner wants to preserve the garage, they're also allowed to do a detached, up to 2 detached units on the property. And in the scenario where you have perhaps a vacant lot, developer wants to come in and build a brand new multifamily development, they are also entitled to an ADU. That a multifamily development would have to meet the zoning requirements for the multifamily development, but they would be allowed an additional ADU, which could meet the 4-foot side and rear setbacks and 16-foot height limit and 800 square feet. So here's a diagram. Here's a plan. Actually, it's a bird's eye view of a sample multifamily property. There's 2 buildings that are shown here. And you can see in each of the buildings, there's 3 units, and the 3 units all contain attached garages. So based on the formula of minimum of 1 ADU and up to 25%, each of the units here would qualify for an ADU. And then ADUs can also be created as a new detached structures on a lot with a developed existing multifamily dwelling. So in Monrovia, we have a lot of lots that are adjacent to alleys. And maybe you have a duplex or a triplex up front. So the maximum number of new construction on lots that are already developed with multifamily units is 2. Monrovia's ordinance does not allow the conversion of detached garages, just attached accessory structures to the multifamily buildings. And then another by right ADU on a lot that's proposed with the multifamily development. As I mentioned before, you get a maximum of 1 ADU, provided that it meets the development standards of 4 feet side and rear, maximum height 16 feet, and it can only exceed the floor area ratio on the lot by 800 square feet. So now what I just covered are the types of ADUs where a homeowner could walk in, submit a plan, and obtain a building permit, and there's no additional planning division review provided that it hits the minimum criteria for the building permit. And then we also have another opportunity for larger ADUs in different formats, and we're calling those all others. So essentially when we say all others, these are going to be ADUs that are greater than that 800 square foot threshold. Monrovia's standards for ADUs are going to allow up to an ADU that's 1,000 square feet in size. ADUs that are created as additions to a single family home, an existing single family home, those are not going to be able to exceed the maximum size of the single family unit by more than 50%. We've also added standards for Monrovia's landmarks, historic district contributors, and Mills Act properties. Monrovia, as you may know, is full of rich history and beautiful neighborhoods where we have a lot of historic resources. The standards that are proposed for landmark and historic properties are just an additional review to make sure there's no impact to those important resources. The different development standards that are going to be looked at by the planning division are called objective design standards. That means that it's not subjective. They're very black and white. And it's essentially, for example, if you're doing an addition to the home to make an ADU, that the design must match that of the existing dwelling or the proposed dwelling. Color, material, roof pitch, those types of things is what we're looking at. The maximum height that Monrovia is proposing for all of our ADUs across the board is 16 feet with the setbacks. You've heard a lot about the 4 feet side and rear, and that will be a common theme you'll see throughout many cities in California. And then, as I mentioned earlier, our maximum size is 1,000 square feet. So parking requirements. Ty mentioned that parking requirements have been reduced. And again, this is another way for the state to allow the ability to streamline and develop additional housing units for the state of California. So if you qualify, if the property owner qualifies for one of those by right building permit only proposals, there's no additional parking that's required for that ADU. And even if you're converting an existing garage, there's no replacement parking that's required to convert the garage. There's also another list of parking exceptions that are created to streamline the development. This is a theme that you'll see in a lot of other cities. So if an ADU is created through an existing space, no parking is required. If it's located within a half mile of walking distance from a public transit, no parking is required. It's located in a historic district, if it's located in an area where permit parking is offered to is not offered to ADU occupants, or if it's located within 1 block of a car share program, then no additional parking is required. So there are going to be very few instances when parking is required, and when parking is required, we're only going to require 1 space, and that space can be on a driveway, does not have to be covered, and that's going to be mainly in rare instances, parking will be required. Our ordinance does outline some covenant requirements that are in line with the state's ordinance and law. And that is that the homeowner occupancy is no longer required for ADUs. It is still required for JADUs. One important covenant restriction for ADUs is that neither the ADU or the JADU may be used for a short-term rental, such as an Airbnb. And these are described as rentals that are less than 30 days. The intent of that is that the use of these structures are really to be housing units and to fulfill the city's housing crisis. So when somebody gets the approval of an ADU, the city will require them to record a covenant, and the city prepares that covenant, and we will assist with the recording of those covenants. There's utility requirements. Each of these ADUs, water and sewer fees apply. They're not required to be on a separate meter, but if a homeowner wishes to rent out this ADU or JADU, it's sometimes helpful to them to have it on a separate meter, but again, it's not a requirement. So that was just kind of an overview of our ordinance. Working in a planning division, we get phone calls about ADUs all day long, and since the states relax their standards, I think the majority of our phone calls these days are about ADUs. So I just kind of wanted to share some common questions that we get. The first question that we get a lot is, can I use a prefabricated structure as an ADU? So that would be like a factory built type of housing structure. And the answer to that is yes, as long as it's certified to have been constructed under federal standards after June 15th, 1976, or if it's certified by the state of California as factory built housing. It has to meet the standards for construction, and it must go through a permit approval process for zoning and or foundation work. Another question we get is, can I use a recreation vehicle like a motorhome or a tiny house on wheels as an ADU? Well, the answer here is no. So recreation vehicles are actually not regulated as buildings. They're regulated as vehicles, and they, unfortunately, the state building code does not apply to them. Another common question, and Mr. Tyong is on the line, is we get, will a building an ADU increase my property value? Well, as with all new construction to the property, like an addition, the value of that added construction is sent over to the assessor's office and will be added value to the property. In Monrovia, we hear, can I build a 2-story ADU? We have a 16-foot height limit in our ordinance. It might be tight to get a 2-story unit within 16 feet, but we actually have an applicant right now who's trying to achieve that. And then lastly, I think the most common question is, how much does it cost to build an ADU? And that's a very difficult question to answer, because you can almost compare it to, how much does a diamond cost? There's so many variables based on size, the materials, the cost of construction, which depends on the market, supply and demand. We've seen some pretty elaborate luxury ADUs here in Monrovia, and we've seen some pretty humble ones. So cities really are not able to say or give you an idea of how much something costs. It depends if you want the Rolls Royce or the Chevrolet. So which ADU is waiting for you? They come in all shapes and sizes. So with that, I'd like to conclude the presentation. I have on this screen both my information and that of Craig's. The Monrovia City Community Development Department, we really offer a one-stop shop to deliver development services, building, planning. We work hand in hand. Our offices are right next to each other. We shout at each other down the hallway. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email planning@ci.monrovia.ca.us or building@ci.monrovia.ca.us. These emails are actually set up to send emails to all of our planners and to all of our building technicians. So one email gets the entire team. And so you will get a response. Our phone numbers are there as well. So with that, Craig and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheri. Craig, also as well. I mean, yes, it's so popular right now, ADUs, and it's really great that you guys are always so available. I can't wait till the counter opens up again, but thank you for putting up the email links. There's a lot of questions coming in the chat, and I'm going to reserve them in a couple minutes. But first, we're going to have, so keep them coming in, but we're going to have Diane Baltimo. She's here in Monrovia. She is a lender, and she's going to do just a quick, brief discussion about ADUs and how they affect financing. Hi, Diane.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diane with Prime Lending here in Monrovia, and Fannie Mae has come out with some guidelines for ADUs. I love the presentation that Craig and Sheri and Ty have given. The lending guidelines are going to be a little different from what some of the guidelines that they shared. As far as a lender is concerned, an ADU, we only allow one ADU on a single family dwelling. And if it's a 2-unit property, Fannie Mae will not allow they will not consider an ADU. It's not a sellable loan. And lenders consider an ADU as a full, we don't do JADUs, the junior ones, because they're, I guess they said they don't have to have a kitchen or something. Well, an ADU must have the following. It has means of ingress, egress, has to have a kitchen, a sleeping area, bathroom facilities. It's got to have a kitchen and a stove hookup, not a hot plate, it has to have a full kitchen and bathroom facilities. And an independent second kitchen by itself does not mean they'll consider an ADU. Lenders will allow, they will give it value as long as it's permitted and all that. It's not considered a duplex, it's considered a single family with an ADU, and they will give it value. But a rental income can only be used if they're buying it as an investment property with an ADU. You cannot own or occupy it and try to qualify with the ADU rental income. Fannie Mae will not allow us to use that. It doesn't have to be a primary dwelling. It can be, like I said, it can be an investment property. The borrower must qualify for the mortgage without using any rental income. And also, if you have a single family home and you want to build an ADU on your property, prime lending, or there's a renovation loan out there that you can actually call us or look into for that financing. You'd refinance your whole property and do a renovation loan to build that ADU unit. And then after it was all done, if you wanted to refinance into one lower interest rate loan, you could do that as well. And I know there are some lenders that do renovation loans that they would also include this. Of course, my presentation is not going to be as long as theirs. Mine's going to be more of a question and answer thing. So take it away, Renee. I can't hear you, Renee.
I know, because I muted myself. Thank you, Diane. Really appreciate it. Okay, so there's a lot of great questions here, and I'm just going to go through the questions as they were chatted. A lot of people, there might be some repetition, but a lot of people have asked for a copy of this presentation or to have the presentation emailed to them. This presentation has been recorded and is continuing to be recorded, and it will be available on the association's website if anybody would like to view it later, or you have a client who, anyone who wants to see it later, it will be available. Okay, so I guess the first question is from Sean. Currently, I'm in the process to develop a second unit in the backyard. Can I be allowed to develop an ADU at the same time?
So I'll answer that.
Thanks.
So it sounds like, and we might need some clarification from Sean, you're in the process of doing a second dwelling unit, which will make the property multifamily. If you are going to be allowed to do a maximum of one ADU. You will still need to meet the multifamily development standards though, for that second unit.
All right, great. Thank you, Sheri. So the next question is, did I hear that an owner must be living in the original house in order to do a JADU?
So the owner occupancy requirement just says the owner has to live on the property. They have the choice of whether they want to live in the primary dwelling unit or the JADU, or even if they have an ADU, they could live in that, but they do have to live on the property.
Okay. If you build an attached ADU, can you make a door that enters into the main house?
You are able to do that, but the ADU does have to have its primary access from the exterior in order for it to qualify as an ADU.
Okay. If you convert a garage to an ADU, do you need to also build a carport?
No. So when you are, I think the question was converting a garage, is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, so there's no replacement parking for a conversion, and that's a very new standard. So prior to 2020, you had to do replacement parking on the property. Cities will not be able to require that anymore.
Oh, wow. Okay, here's one from Ryan. I live in Monrovia on a 15,000 square foot lot and already built a 5,700 square foot granny flat for my mom. My garage is about 600 square feet. and the setbacks are about 3 feet from the original structure of the garage. Could I convert my garage into a JADU in that situation?
So under Monrovia's ordinance, JADUs can only be converted through existing living area in the primary dwelling.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. An ADU less than 500 square feet, will I be required to pay an impact fee?
No. Impact fees are exempt on less than 750 square feet.
Okay, thank you. This one is from M. The maximum height of 16 feet, is that the total height or the ADU height? So for example, if I want to build on top of my garage, is the 16 feet for the total height of the garage and ADU or just the ADU?
It's the total height. So it's the height from the grade. So if you're building on top of an existing structure, the total ridge height can't be higher than 16 feet.
Okay, I have a few more questions. A lot of people said you guys are awesome. Thank you, very informative to all of you. So I just wanted to add that because we have quite a few of that, so thank you. So this next question comes from Ray. Are ADUs or JADUs allowed on the Habitat for Humanity properties on Sherman Ave? I guess that would be for Ty. And Ty, you're muted.
That all depends on what the city has to say, but
Oh.
I know in San Jose, there was a building that was built by Habitat for Humanity. So, is it a house or is it owned by Habitat for Humanity?
Well, they didn't clarify in the question, so.
So I think
Because-
that would probably be a Habitat for Humanity question. I don't know whether that would be in their agreement with the property owners. As long as it meets the city's requirements, then it doesn't really matter who built it and who lives there.
Yeah, and I think that's so Habitat for Humanity can build something there. Also, this jumps into that separate conveyance. If the lot is owned by an approved nonprofit like Habitat for Humanity, that second unit, or basically you can sell off one of the unit to a qualified buyer. So basically someone who is also low income who qualifies can buy the one of the units. So you don't have to sell both of the units at the same time.
Oh, that's very interesting. This next question, thank you, Ty. This next question goes to Diane. Do you do construction loans for homes? Would it be I guess the question is, would you need a construction loan?
If it's called a renovation loan, you wouldn't need a construction loan. So the renovation loan would be, you have to have a licensed contractor. The city of Monrovia, if it's in Monrovia, that they have to take their plans to the city would have to approve everything, and it cannot be owner builder. But yes, we would refinance the whole property, including their main residence. It would be included in what they would call a renovation loan, not a construction loan. And renovation loans typically are about 0.5% to 0.6% higher than a normal 30-year fixed rate, depending on credit and loan to value. And it would have to, if you're going to add it to the property would have to, what they do, a future appraisal value. So they would take the property as is and then appraise it with an ADU to give it the further value.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Yeah. This next question is for you as well. Can you please clarify when the rental income from ADU will count?
I'm sorry?
They asked if you could clarify when the rental income from ADU will count.
They buy it they cannot live in the property. So if they're trying to qualify, it would be, they have to buy it as an investment with the ADU and they can use it that way for qualifying. But if they're buying it to live in it and then try to use the ADU as rental income, that they cannot use it that way. Is that what they're asking?
I think so. The next question comes, thank you, Diane. The next question comes from Brad. And I lost your question. if I have converted a garage on a multifamily property that has not been permitted, what is the process to get the existing unpermitted as an ADU? The existing unit permitted as an ADU. Sorry,
So, yeah, so if I understood, this was a multifamily property.
correct.
So for multifamily properties, the only type of garages that can be converted to ADUs are those that are attached to a multifamily dwelling. Staff would need to review in order to qualify the garage would have to be qualified first. It would have to be, the scenario would be, it would have to be attached to the main dwelling, it would have to meet the setbacks for a multifamily development. So we would need to put the garage, the theoretical garage through the review first in order to verify if we could even permit it. There's other zoning requirements about the square footage of maximum accessory square footage we'd have to look at. But what's important to know is we do get a lot of different types of plans. Folks come to us all the time and say, I have this property. This is a situation that happened. And our team really looks and strives to try to make a positive outcome for the property owners. We put all of our thinking caps on and we try to be as creative as possible.
Great, thank you for that. Albert is asking which type of ADUs have to have the 16-foot max height?
All ADUs, that's the maximum height that any ADU can be.
Okay, thank you. Someone's asking about utilities. If the city allows 2 additional ADUs, does that mean the utility companies are in agreement to provide services for the additional ADUs as well?
Go ahead, Sheri.
I'm just going to say the utility companies will have to, the property owner is going to have to show that they will have service for that, whether it's sewer, water, electricity, in order to be qualified as residential units.
And generally, the utility companies look to the city to see whether or not it's a permitted structure. So if we are permitting a unit, then they will typically provide the service. Then that's usually not an issue.
Great, just a few more questions. This next one's for Diane. If we add 1 to 2 ADUs on an existing 4-unit apartment, will Fannie and Freddie finance the loan?
No, they will only, the ADU is only with a single family. They won't do it to 2 units, anything more than a single family. So if it's already a 3-unit or a 4-unit property with an ADU, no, they will not finance it.
Okay. How much is the impact fee? I think this is a Ty question.
But typically, impact fees are charged by the city. ADUs for the city of Monrovia are exempt from our traffic impact fee, which is really our only impact fee that we have.
Okay. What is, I guess, City of Monrovia, what is the current impact fee?
We don't have, for ADUs, there isn't an impact fee
Okay.
that would be applicable to an ADU.
Okay. Thank you so much for clarifying. If you build an ADU, would the added value of the ADU be added, or would your whole house be reevaluated for property tax?
That will be for me. That will be added to whatever your property tax is. So if the ADU is calculated to be worth $100,000, we just add it to whatever your property value or adjusted property value was prior to the addition of the ADU.
Okay, great. I think that's it for questions. And remember, everybody, this will be recorded. It is recorded. It will be available later. And our panel, if you can reach them at Sheri, I know she posted her contact information. Hi, you can reach at the assessor's website as well. And Diane at her Prime Lending website. If you have any further questions you want to ask them, I know they're very great about replying. I really appreciate all of you, Ty and Sheri, Craig and Diane, for all taking time out of your day to talk about this to the community, realtors, and homeowners as well. Thank you for being the first in our series of events. Really appreciate having all of you here. And I hope this provided some clarity to a definitely popular topic. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
This concludes the
Renee.
presentation.
Thank you, Renee.
Bye.